I'm going to break my own rules on this and bring a fourth book into my currently reading list. So, the rule I have is I try to limit myself to three books. That's one book, slowly working my way through the Bible, and one comic book. So, for as long as I'm working on my Read the Bible project, one of the books in my reading list is going to be a book of the Bible as I slowly work my way through it. Then I also try to keep one slot for a comic book during my weekly reading. And then that leaves one slot open for whatever. And whatever at the current moment happens to be classical tragedy, Greek and Roman, which is 8 plays. Actually, I'm counting this as 10 plays because I'm breaking the Orestia trilogy into three separate plays. And I've made the decision that after each play, I'm going to film a short review of each play. So to treat this as 10 separate books almost rather than one book. Now, it's probably not the way I have to do this, may not even be the way that it's recommended to do this, but that's the way I've chosen to do this. Which means sometimes I will finish one of the plays and I won't be free to film a video immediately because I'll be in the middle of the workday or I'll have a busy day or something like that. And then if I have extra time to read at work, rather than start the next play, I don't want to move on and start the next play until I've wrapped up the previous play and filmed my video on it. Then if I'm going to be reading something, I'll just pick up another book to read. And I went to my bookshelves to try and pick up something that was light and short and sweet. And this book was on my bookshelf. I picked this up from Book Street here in Saigon a little over a year ago. And I'll link to the video in which I talked about picking this up from Book Street. So I picked this up on a used bookstore in Book Street, and it caught my eye because it ticks a couple of boxes of reading things that I've been interested in. One is Roger Lancelyn Green. Now, I've not read any of his books yet. This is the first book of his that I'm going to read. But I've been interested in him for a little bit. He's popped up in a couple of my searches. When I read the Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, Neil Gaiman mentioned the Myths of the Norsemen by Roger Lancelyn Green as his introduction to Norse mythology. And I think for the people of Neil Gaiman's generation, the baby boomers, Gaiman's a baby boomer, right? Myths of the Norsemen, I guess, was the standard go-to introduction for Norse mythology. Also, Roger Lancelyn Green did The Luck of Troy, which I've also not read, but popped up in one of my searches for modern retellings of the Trojan War. I believe it's somewhat of an original story, somewhat of a retelling of the traditional story. But yeah, this actually, once I found this on the internet, I realized that my brother used to have this book on his shelves. And I really regret not picking it up when I had access to it. Because now I'm here in Vietnam and I don't have access to my brother's bookshelf anymore. But I think my brother read it as part of a college class. It's a kid's book, but I think my brother was taking some sort of juvenile literature class, and this was part of the reading list. And then it was on his shelves for a few years after that in my parents' house. And I regret not picking up at the time, and now I don't have access to it, and I haven't had much luck tracking it down out here in Vietnam. But both of these books I'm familiar with. So I looked up Roger Lancelyn Green on Wikipedia, and it turns out that in addition to these books, his other big claim to fame is he was part of the Inklings, which is the writer's circle that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were in. with a few other assorted people. But C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were those are the names everyone remembers. And Roger Lancelyn Green was another one of those famous inklings. According to his Wikipedia bio and also the little about the author here, he was really interested in the old folklore and the old mythology, and I guess made his living writing modern versions of that. Now, the other thing I've been interested in rather recently is Robin Hood. So, like everyone else, I grew up with Robin Hood, the movies, the books, the cartoons. But a few years ago, a couple years ago now, I think, I got out from my school library what was it? I think it was The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood by Howard Pyle. I'll double check that title and put it in the description down below. Which, according to Wikipedia, was one of the books that solidified certain elements of the Robin Hood legend for what would become known as the definitive version of Robin Hood in the 20th century. And Howard Pyle's book was published in 1883. And that book just made me interested in tracking down the Robin Hood classics. There's no one definitive book of Robin Hood, the way there is like a Malory for King Arthur. Something actually Roger Lancelyn Green says in his introduction, so I guess I'm stealing this directly from him. Robin Hood had no Malory, and he has had few poets. So there's like a collection of kind of like medieval poems, or not even a collection, a loose collection. And then Robin Hood's story gradually began to take place in the 19th century, and Howard Pyle's book was one of the books that gave it form. Now, Howard Pyle was Roger Lancelyn Green doesn't even mention Howard Pyle in his introduction here. I guess because he's drawing on older sources. No, because he mentions Alfred. How do you say that? Noah's from 1926. So this is after Howard Pyle. Maybe because Howard Pyle was an American and Roger Lancelyn Green was British. I don't know. Obviously the Puffin publishers have called this a classic. So let's call this one of the classic retellings of Robin Hood. Although, according to both Wikipedia and according to the date here, this was published in 1956. So this is after the Hollywood Robin Hood has been established. I mean, the Errol Flynn Robin Hood came out in 1938. So this is like almost 20 years after Errol Flynn. So this is not... This is, I think we can maybe safely say this is not one of the books that was influential in establishing the Robin Hood legend, right? Anything after Errol Flynn, I think you have to say, okay, at this point, Hollywood is the dominant source in shaping the Robin Hood legend. And, well, although I don't know. How influential would you say this book is? If you know anything about it. Is it just another Robin Hood book among many? Or does this have some claim to be among the classics? And again, Puffin Classics has classified this as a classic. And, I suppose even though 1956 doesn't seem to me like a classic book. I mean, I think classics is like something from the 19th century or earlier. But, the vast majority of books get published and then go through their initial print run and then immediately die out, right? So the fact that this is still being in print all these years later, after 1956, shows that it's, I guess, a classic of sorts. Now, when I was reading Howard Pyle's book, just kind of out of interest, I was constantly going to Wikipedia to look up where these characters came from. Like, like Maid Marian. Maid Marian, I think if I remember from Wikipedia correctly, does not actually show up in the earliest legends of Robin Hood. Or Will Scarlet, where does he come from? Or Alan Nadale or Guy Gisborne. I don't think I'm going to be doing that as much with this book because I already did that once and my curiosity has largely been satisfied. It was a couple years ago, so some of that I only half remember. But I think my plan is to just read this as a normal book and just kind of take Roger Lancelyn Green's version of it without double checking Wikipedia every 2 minutes to see how close this aligns with the original ballads. I'll just read this and just not bother to double check it. Just kind of take this for whatever story it is, and then come back and talk about it. I've already in this afternoon gotten 40 pages into it. And found that it so far it is quite different than Howard Pyle's version in terms of when the characters meet each other and stuff like that. But very readable. I mean, you can tell this was something written in the 20th century. It's incredibly smooth, easy reading. At the moment now, I guess I'm balancing these two books. And this one seems like it should be a very light read, so I imagine I'll finish it off quickly.